Hey guys, Dr. Michael Young here. I hope you're out today enjoying some of this great weather. Finally got a reprieve from some of that cold weather. But here I am. I hope you appreciate this. I'm here on this beautiful day. I'm looking outside. Such a great day, but I'm putting together this video recording for my students because that's just how dedicated I am. Today we're talking about culture, differences in culture. We're going to talk about all the factors around culture. So sit back, enjoy the lesson, take notes. Right, culture. This is it's an important and interesting and exciting topic. It's what makes, for me, it's what makes international travel so much fun. Living and working in other places and seeing other cultures is what makes, an international career worthwhile. I mean, there are lots of things about my career overseas that I would have done regardless of whether I would have gotten paid as much as I did. Luckily, they rewarded me very well for that at the same time. But anyway, cultural literacy refers to understanding how cultural differences across and within countries can affect the way that business is practiced. There are lots of things about culture that we take for granted. I believe last time we mentioned this idea of this socially created reality that we live in. Much of our world is not necessarily concrete and real. Of course, say this table that I'm sitting at right now is real, but other things are not real, like rules of the road and, norms about how you go and you buy things at the grocery store. There are lots of things that are part of that reality that are socially agreed upon by everybody that's involved. Culture differs between different groups of people. It creates a common bond. Sometimes this can get overly strong in terms of nationalism, but nonetheless is something that we have to deal with. There are numerous values and norms that exist within these different cultural systems that might affect international business, and cultures do evolve over time. Culture of the United States, for example, right now is way different than what it was when the country was first founded back in the late 1700s. So, culture, it's a value of norms, values among a group of people. Take it together, they agree upon different things that are the way that they should be, you might say. This is the part of values. Ideas about what a group believes to be good, right, and desirable, and in norms. Social rules and guidelines prescribe appropriate behavior in particular situations. And a society is a group of people that has a common set of values and norms. Moving right along, let's talk about the first one, values and norms. Values provide the context within which a society's norms are established and justified. What makes up the good life? Philosophers, political philosophers, agree. Most of them agree that there's not an agreement on what makes up the good life. Is it better to have more leisure time? Is it better to have more money? Is it better to have family? Is family more important? And all of these things are going to vary from different societies. It's part of their culture, part of their value and norms. They're invested with emotional significance, and they're reflected within the economic systems of a society. Whatever the society values, those things will tend to show up within the economic system. Norms. Norms is a sociological term. A norm are social rules that govern people's actions toward one another. Folkways are routine conventions of everyday life. Examples: appropriate dress code, good social manners, include rituals and symbolic behavior. Is it appropriate to hold the door open for a man to hold the door open for a woman? Is this appropriate? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? It depends, right? And it's changed over time. I believe that, say, 50, 100 years ago, there was no question that it was a good thing for a man to hold the door open for a woman. But now that our views and attitudes towards genders changing, That's debatable. I'm not going to take a position on this. I'm going to remain neutral, but I am going to maintain, and I believe that there's no controversy here, that whether a man should hold the door open for a woman, some people believe that's a good thing, and some people believe that it's not necessarily a good thing. Depends on the era in which you were raised and society in which you were raised. I don't know if you guys ever watched the Seinfeld shows. One of the things about Seinfeld that I really like is they make fun of norms of behavior. For example, nose picking. Nose picking, believe it or not, this is a social norm. I know a lot of people are grossed out when someone picks their nose. I'm not going to demonstrate now, by the way. Imagine for yourself that I'm picking my nose, okay? I'm not going to demonstrate because we have norms against that in our society. This is what's weird. I've been in societies, and it's quite shocking to see societies in which nose picking in public is not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not going to mention those societies because I don't think it's even necessary. But it's quite shocking whenever you see someone do things that we believe to not be good behavior in public. Another one is, in Chinese culture, it's considered good manners to pick up your bowl and slurp from the bowl. For one thing, Chinese people don't always have spoons and forks. They usually use chopsticks. So a lot of times it's to eat the rice, they scrape the food in from the bowl. That's perfectly okay in that society. When I was there, I did it too. But in our society, it's not considered to be good manners. These include rituals and symbolic behavior, putting your hand on your heart. All of these things are symbolic and ritual behavior that are part of the norms of a particular society. Mores are norms that maybe have some sort of formal punishment involved with them. For example, mores are laws against theft. They have greater moral significance than other norms. Yeah, it's kind of cool stuff. And in all the places that I've visited, one of the most fascinating things, of course, at least for me, is not only the beautiful scenery and the different scenery that you see, but also the different cultures that you see around the world, the different things that are accepted and not accepted, different ways of viewing the world, part of the socially created reality of these different cultures that makes you view your own culture very differently than before. So culture, the relationship between a society and a nation state is clearly not strictly one-to-one. Nation states are political creations. A nation can have several cultures, and a culture can embrace several nations. There can be different levels of culture within a particular country. And actually, the United States is a fairly unified culture. I know we have a lot of divisions right now politically, and between, say, the Republicans and the Democrats, the Reds and the Blues. But all in all, our level of cultural uniformity is actually pretty high, because the United States is actually a pretty new nation, and everyone came here roughly about the same time. It's been taking place over the past 200 years. We've had immigration, and people are pretty well assimilated, at least historically, into the main national culture. If you go to other older societies like India, for example, or China, two very huge nation states, but within those nation states you have different cultures. You might even say you have different societies. Within India, for example, there are lots of different languages. There are lots of different, not only religions, but philosophies and different views of life that from region to region to region. And so all of this has grown up over a very long period of time. And so it means that the culture is not nearly as uniform geographically as it is in the United States. Likewise, you might have heard that one of the reasons that they have problems in the Middle East is that a lot of those countries were created, the nation states, the borders were created rather artificially. They didn't take into account the different cultures. So within what is now Iraq, you actually had previous tribes, previous societies that were kind of lumped together, and the boundaries didn't really take into account the different cultures. And so that creates problems for the governors or the people as they try to govern the nation state, because there are different societies within a particular country, which makes it hard to reach consensus and agreement. Harder. The graph from your textbook, figure 4.1, talks about where what determines culture, the cultural norms and value systems. It depends on religion. The U.S. predominantly has been Judeo-Christian, right? And it's the most widely practiced religion in the U.S., although we have lots of every religion of the world, of course, is practiced in the U.S. I have to be so careful. I'm not saying that one religion is better. I'm just saying that predominantly we have been a Christian Judeo nation, and that's affected our culture. Political philosophy, United States, I believe I mentioned this before last time, was formed in a relatively short period of time, during a period of time called the Enlightenment, and it was very much influenced by the political philosophy of a couple of English philosophers named Thomas Hobbes, John Locke. Economic philosophy. Some of our econ people have heard of Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations. Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations was published in 1776. This is sometimes considered to be the birth of economics, the first true economics textbook, and so it just happened to coincide with the birth of the United States. Of course, education in the United States now is it's free all throughout the United States. People have access to free education up through the 12th grade. I don't believe there's a single part of the United States where you don't have access to free education if you're an American citizen. Language influences the way that we view the world. Linguistics is a very interesting topic of study because how we form words. We use words to help us think, and these words help us to view the world. So our language influences the way that we view the world. It's really true because it influences the way that we think. It's kind of like the software of the mind, and so it influences our culture. And then, of course, the social structure. We historically have a pretty fluid social structure in the United States, and at least historically, this is changing. Social mobility is not as great in the United States as what it once was, but with greater social mobility and social structure, less hardened. We don't have an aristocracy, for example. We don't have dukes and duchesses, and kings and queens, and all of these other things that came from Europe and other parts of the world where they have a more stratified social structure. A couple dimensions of social structure. Social structure refers to the basic organization of a society. There are two dimensions that are particularly helpful in explaining differences among cultures. The degree to which the basic unit of social organization is the individual as opposed to the group. And within a group, the group might be the nation state, it might be the tribe, it might be the family. For example, collectivist culture between Japan versus China, both of those are considered to be more collectivist cultures than is the United States. We're going to see in just a moment the United States is very individualistic. But I've heard it said that the basic unit of collectivism for Japan is more likely to be the country, where in China it's more likely to be the family or the tribe or village. All right. So the second one is the degree to which a society is stratified into classes or castes. India has historically had a caste system. They've tried to abolish that, but the castes are very rigid. You're born into a caste. It's very hard to move out of that particular caste, and the caste has different levels on the society. Likewise, British society, at least until recently, and I guess still so, British society is supposedly much more stratified than is American society because they still have remnants of an old feudal society in which they had aristocracy, and so you have people that identify with their class structure more so than the United States. Other factors that influence this are religious and ethical system. These two are related. Usually ethical system, if a particular country is very religious, you'll see the ethical system tends to follow that religious. Religion is a system of shared beliefs and rituals concerned with the realm of the sacred. Ethical system, we're calling that a set of moral principles and values that are used to guide and shape behavior. And again, as I mentioned, most ethical systems are the product of religion. And again, I don't believe I'm saying anything controversial when I point out that the U.S. was founded upon Christian Judeo principles of the Bible, both the Old Testament and the New Testament, and a lot of that influenced the founding fathers. And so we see that particular religion is interwoven within our system of ethics and within our legal system. If you go to another country that, say, is a different religion, it's going to have a different ethical system, different legal system. Four dominant religions today, and I've added another one. It's not actually religion, but the first one is Christianity. Christianity is the most heavily practiced, or the most, as far as religions go, it's the most popular. In other words, it's practiced by more people throughout the world than any other religion. If you look at South America, if you look at North America, you look at Europe, you look at Australia, those countries tend to be predominantly, the majority of people that are practicing a religion in those countries are practicing Christianity. The second one is Islam. Islam is the Muslim religion. It's kind of gotten a bad rap lately because it's often associated, whether rightly or wrongly, with terrorism. Islam was also one of the Abrahamic religions. The Abrahamic religions. Judaism. I know I was going to be able to say it here in a moment. Christianity and Islam all came from Abraham. A lot of them refer to the same prophets, the same people. The third one is Hinduism. This is a huge religion within India. And fourth one is Buddhism. Fifth one, your textbook points out this one. It's not really a religion. Confucius is not a god. He's a philosopher, but he's had such a dominant impact on much of the world, and a lot of his impact has been on ethics and so forth, that I've included him here with a little misnomer here that not actually a religion. Okay, so Confucianism is a philosophy that's guiding much of the world today. This is Math 4.1 from your textbook. It has the predominant religions of the world. Roman Catholic. Filipinos are mostly Roman Catholic. You can see most of Central and South America. Protestantism goes up through a lot of the U.S. Mixed sex. Not sex. Mormon here, but also we can see parts over here. Eastern Orthodox churches, taking much of Eastern Bloc, Russia. Sunni, Shia, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, you can look at this to get an idea for where different religions are practiced throughout the world. Languages, spoken languages. Languages structure the way that we see the world. in ways that we don't even really understand. One of the things that's made our thought processes much more precise is the ability to form words. And think about it. Whenever you have a thought, you're kind of talking to yourself in your head, right? And so we only have certain words, and we use words to describe the world that we see. And so we use those words to think when we're talking to ourselves. And so our language influences the way that we see the world. Countries with more than one language often have more than one culture. Mandarin is the mother tongue spoken by the largest number of people than anyone else in the world. I've tried to study Mandarin. I don't know. I can get by in Mandarin. It's a very difficult language to speak. The most widely spoken language in the world, not the mother tongue, but the language, is English. An awful lot of the world studies English as a second language. And so within China, for example, you can get by in the large cities speaking English. Almost any large city in the world you can get by with English because it seems to have become the language of international business, right? And so we're kind of lucky. Those of us that speak English as our mother tongue are rather lucky in that we happen to have as our mother tongue a language that's become an international language, a language for international business. There's also nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communications are often culturally bound. Whenever I was in Hong Kong, I could always tell a group of Americans, even if they were Chinese Americans, because of the nonverbal cues, the way that they would dress, the way that they would speak, the interpersonal space. All of these things vary from culture to culture. The guy that's most famous for developing culture, he's kind of a first mover in the field of culture, is a guy named Geert Hofstede. This is a Dutch name. And so these dimensions of culture are very, very famous. You've probably or possibly heard of these dimensions of culture in some of your other classes. But Geert Hofstede, so one of the most famous pioneers of the study of culture, especially for international business, is a guy by the name of Geert Hofstede. That's a Dutch name. And Hofstede, he's become famous. You may have seen this in some of your other courses, this idea of Hofstede's dimensions of culture. And according to Hofstede, according to Hofstede, cultures differ. And he's got empirical evidence for this. This is not just some pie-in-the-sky idea. He actually measured this. He said that cultures differ by something he called power distance. Another one is individualism versus collectivism. Another one is uncertainty avoidance. Another one is masculinity versus femininity. Another one is long-term versus short-term orientation. And another one that's a relatively new one is called indulgence versus restraint. This was added in 2010. So where did he come up with these? Well, and how did he come up with this, and why is it so important? Well, Geert Hofstede, was working for IBM back in the 1950s, sometime 50s, 60s, in that period of time. And he had all of this data. And he began to look at all of this data. And IBM at that time had employees in every country. Guess they probably still do. Being a multinational corporation, they had people from all over the world. So Hofstede took all of this data and he ran it through a computer program, and he came up with these different clusters, and he began to see how these cultures differed across different countries. And so these are the things that kind of jumped out from the data. So this is an empirical and data-driven study. Power distance really is formality. Whenever you're around the boss, do you treat the boss with a lot of deference? Is there a lot of bowing? Is there a lot of yes sir and no sir? Or is the boss just one of the boys? Or the teacher? Is the teacher considered to be within a classroom, do you treat the teacher with a lot of, let's say, deference to the teacher's needs? Yes teacher, no teacher. Or is the teacher just, again, low power distance, we would say, just one of the people in the crowd? Next one, individualism versus collectivism. Well, societies differ on the extent to which they put emphasis on individualism, individual rights and freedom, individual incentives, individual rewards, versus collectivism. Collectivism, and this collectivism might be directed toward the organization, it might be directed toward the family, it might be directed toward the tribe, it might be directed toward the country. But do we put rewards on the group as opposed to the individual? As you might have guessed, U.S. tends to be very, very individualistic. It scores higher on individualism than it's way up at the top. I'd have to go and look at the data again, but I know it's very, very close to the top, and that's part of our philosophical and religious heritage. Next one is uncertainty avoidance. That is, are members within a society comfortable with ambiguity? Are they comfortable in situations where they don't know what's going to happen next? Tolerating uncertainty, or in social situations, so they like to have everything sort of mapped out, right? U.S. tends to be pretty low on this one. We can tolerate quite a bit of uncertainty avoidance in our societies. Next one is, does the society idealize masculine traits, which might be things like assertiveness and aggressiveness, versus feminine traits, which might be things more like consensus and nurturing, those types of things. So this is another dimension, masculinity versus femininity. Next one, long-term versus short-term. Do we expect things to happen right away? Are we short-term oriented as a society or as a culture? Or are we a little bit more relaxed and willing to let things take place over a longer period? And then finally, indulgence. Do we tend to indulge ourselves as individuals, or do we tend to restrain ourselves and be rather hard on ourselves? And basically what we're saying is that Western nations, particularly Protestant nations, tend to score high on individualism, low on power distance. Latin American and Asian countries tend to emphasize collectivism and score higher on power distance. And Japan demonstrates strong uncertainty avoidance. Japan they're not comfortable with ambiguity in social situations. And then also high masculinity. They tend to value traits that we might classify as masculine as opposed to traits that we might classify as feminine. A couple of other measures of culture that your textbook talks about. One is called the Global Leadership and Organizational Behavior Effectiveness, the GLOBE, G-L-O-B-E instrument. This basically says that a leader's effectiveness is contextual. It's embedded in the societal and organizational norms, values, and beliefs of the people being led. And it established 9 different cultural dimensions. Some of these are overlapping with Hofstede, and some of them are different. We've got power distance, uncertainty avoidance, humane orientation, institutional collectivism, in-group collectivism, assertiveness, gender egalitarianism, future orientation, and performance orientation. Another one is the WVS, the World Values Survey. This explores people's values and norms, how they change over time, what impact they have on society and dimension. This one is measured across different societies and looks at these dimensions: support for democracy, tolerance of foreigners and ethnic minorities, support for gender equality, the role of religion in changing levels of religiosity, the impact of globalization, attitudes toward the environment, work, family, politics, national identity, culture, diversity, and insecurity, and subjective well-being. The thing about culture and values is it's not constant. It evolves over time. Wow. I was looking at some old commercials the other day that a friend sent to me, and you may have done this. Looked at some of those old commercials from the 1960s, which looked at things like cigarette sales, and also that would have things that would not be accepted today, like women's places in the home. And so, yeah, that's changed. I mean, attitudes towards women have changed quite a bit. Women in the workplace. And, it's a good thing. I sincerely believe that it's a good thing because it makes us more productive when we tap into everyone's individual talent. If you want to look at the way that women used to be treated in the workplace, go back and look at the the series Mad Men. I don't know if you watched that. I enjoyed watching it very much. Set in the 1960s, and it's about advertising agencies. There appears to be a move toward greater individualism in Japan, for example. They're much more, but they become influenced by Western societies. Culture may change as a society becomes wealthier. There are also some evidence of counter trends. There's a shift towards Islamic fundamentalism in some countries. There are separatist movements in Canada, Montreal, and the northwest part of Canada. The French-speaking part tried to separate. There are separate movements in Russia. There in the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is made up of Scotland, Ireland, and England and Wales, and occasionally those different subsectors, those different parts of the entire country will have a movement towards separation. Why is this important for managers? Well, cross-cultural literacy is very important. Whenever you're doing business in other countries, you need to be aware of different cultural norms, values, how this might influence your business. Finally, the author of this textbook, Charles Hill, he's done some research, and I've read a lot of his work. He's a famous scholar, and he says that culture influences companies, and this is kind of a neat idea. It's the idea that some companies from some countries are more competitive in certain areas because of their culture. So he gives the example of, the U.S. educational system being more focused on creativity, and that causes Americans to be better at creative types of industries, and so our companies tend to be competitive in those types of industries. Whereas Japan tends to be a little bit more conservative. They tend to lead in certain types of manufacturing industries. So it has, who knows, it has an impact on the competitive advantage across different countries. Alright, so that's it. Yeah, we finished up another lesson. If you haven't gone out there and enjoyed this nice weather, get out there and do it right away. This is Michael saying see you next time. Stay awesome.